Hello again and welcome to Marketing for Charities Briefing 8, brought to you by the Worshipful Company of Marketers. My name is Peter Rees and I shall be your host and narrator for this briefing, in which we'll cover part 1 of Tactics. I'll start as usual giving you an overview of the agenda items we're going to cover in this briefing. First of all, I'll take a checkpoint and just remind you where we've got to in our overall journey and where this briefing fits in with the overall programme. I'll then talk about a marketing concept called the marketing mix, which really is a way of defining the tactics or the tactical things we can do to help implement strategy. I'll then spend a little bit of time talking about services and services offerings and why these are different from other forms of product. I'll then look at the next steps in our briefing series and tell you how any questions can be answered before finishing as usual with some concluding remarks. Let me start by reminding you where we've got to in our briefing series. We're now starting a series of briefings about the subject of tactics, and these fit in, as you can see here, and answer the question, which way is best? Tactics really is a definition of the things you can do to implement strategy, and because it's such a comprehensive area, I'm going to take a few briefings to cover it fully. So we started off by looking at where we are today in the situation analysis. We set objectives, smart objectives, which define where we were going. We've spent a little bit of time talking about strategy, which define the big things we can do and the directions we can take to make sure that we get there. And tactics answer the question, which way is best? What are the specific things we need to do to implement strategy? The main model that's used when marketers talk about tactics is something called the marketing mix, or the 7 Ps, and I'll now spend a little bit of time explaining how that is constructed. The concept of the marketing mix was first developed by an American called E. Jerome McCarthy, who was the first person to suggest this concept of a marketing mix. And a marketing mix is really a definition of the offer or the product that is delivered to a market by an organisation. Now, when he originally invented this, it was all to do with physical products, but as we'll see on later slides, this was later developed further to talk about services as well. But the original definition of the marketing mix was concerned with 4 things: the product, the physical product that one delivered to a market, the price charged, the promotion or the way it was promoted or communicated, and the place or places where it was sold or delivered or accessed by customers and potential customers. And these 4 variables, the first marketing mix was 4 Ps, are a definition of all the things that one needs to think about, the tactics you put in place when you're delivering physical products into a market. After the original 4 Ps of the marketing mix, the world moved on in the 60s and 70s, and some further Ps were invented and developed to take account of the requirements of marketing services. So the first 4 Ps, product, price, promotion, place, were to do with physical products, and then another 3 Ps were added to do with selling and marketing services. And these Ps are people, process and physical evidence. So on the diagram here you can see the totality of the marketing mix as it's understood and used today, which is made up of 7 Ps. So 7 Ps are the constituent parts, the tactics that define today's marketing mix, covering both products and services. I'll now spend a little bit of time going through the 7 Ps of today's marketing mix and exploring the different elements, particularly in the context and the way that they relate to charities and charity marketing. So the first P in the marketing mix is the P for product, which is a definition of what you offer. Now, in many cases, charities do actually offer a physical product, but sometimes the offer is not just a product, it's a product and or a service. So let's look at the difference between these 3 approaches. First of all, we have a physical product, fairly easy to understand. It's something like, for example, a food package or a tent or a house is a physical thing that the charity delivers to its target stakeholders, its beneficiaries, its clients. Sometimes, however, the charity offers a service, and here I'm thinking about things like consultations or briefings or advice or guidance or lobbying activities that some charities undertake. There's nothing tangible, so what is delivered is a service. In many cases, what the charity offers and brings to the market is a product or service combination. It's a combination of a physical product and experiential elements on briefings and support that goes around it. So for example, for a homeless person, it might be the physical product is a bed for the night, but also around it are services such as treatment of addiction problems or advice on welfare or benefits to which they're entitled. So for a charity, an offer can be one of three forms. It can be a physical product, it can be a pure service with no physical product involved, or a combination of a product and a service. So you need to start thinking about your charity and what you offer to the market in these terms, because it will help you later on when we get into the other areas of the marketing mix. The next P of the marketing mix is concerned with price, which talks about the economic model or the exchange of value, if you remember our earlier discussion, that a charity makes with its target stakeholders when delivering its offers or its services or its products into the market. And I've identified here 5 different economic or value exchange models that charities that I've worked with have used. The first example is where the charity actually makes a loan. It gives a loan of some money to a beneficiary to achieve a particular outcome, and then this loan is repaid by the beneficiary at some future point in time. The second option is where the charity actually gives out money to the beneficiary. It makes a grant of cash for the beneficiary to achieve some particular outcome. Sometimes charities deliver their offers for free. There's no charge to the beneficiary, no charge to the client, or sometimes the beneficiary or the client is asked to make a contribution based on what they can afford to help support the charity in its activities. And finally, there's a model shown on the right hand of this slide where charities actually do a full charge out of their products or services or offers to the beneficiaries in the market, a pure commercial transaction. I'll give you some examples of some charities that I've worked with that give an example for each of these business models, these value exchange models. The first one is the Samuel Wilson Loan Trust, which is a charity established under the auspices of the Corporation of the City of London, who supervise its activities today. And this is an organisation which was set up, as you can see there, in 1771 as a way to make loans to small start-up businesses in and around the City of London to establish new business, new commercial activity in and around London. Loans are granted on the basis that they will be repaid after an agreed period once the startup business is successful and generating cash and profit to enable it to repay the loan. The second is the Sheriff and Recorders Fund, which is a charity based at the Old Bailey and managed and administered on behalf of the most senior judge at the Old Bailey and the sheriffs of the City of London. And this is an organisation which makes grants to ex-offenders to help them start themselves up again in business, to earn an honest living, if I can put it that way. And these are pure cash grants which don't have to be repaid to suitable individuals to help them get back on the straight and narrow and make a commercial success and generate income for themselves and their families moving forward. The next example is charities such as the Salvation Army, which offer many of their services at no charge. They're offered for free to their target beneficiaries and stakeholders. The next model is a model where contributions are asked, and this is a charity that I've worked with over a number of years, and it's called PTSD Resolution. And it's a charity that provides support and treatment and counselling and services for ex-members of the British services who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health issues as a result of their service for this country. And they offer many of their services for free, but do ask people who can afford to make a contribution to support their work moving forward. The final one is an example of a fee charging charity. It's not one I've had personal dealings with as a consultant. It is Relate, the relationship counselling organisation. Now, I looked at their website recently and I see that they are now charging a fee for their counselling and advice services. So those are the 5 different models which are to do with price in the marketing mix, and 5 different charities that are very successful using the 5 different models of exchange that I'm showing here. So you need to think about how your charity is operating today, and do you have the possibility to move to another circle on this diagram. The next area of the marketing mix that I wish to talk about is the P of promotion, and this is the area that covers marketing communications. Now, this is such a big and important area. I'm only going to touch on it briefly here on this slide because it is the subject, the total subject of the next 2 briefings on tactics to do with promotion and marketing communications. But essentially, marketing communications covers 3 areas, or the 3 M's as marketers call them. The message, which is the message or messages that you wish to communicate, the things you wish to say, the markets and the people whom you wish to communicate with, and methods being the different tools and techniques that you could use to get those messages across to those markets. So as I say, I'm going to talk about this much more in the next two briefings. The next P of the marketing mix is the P of place, which literally defines the places where customers can access the products or services or offers that you're bringing to the market. So place is all about the places where the beneficiaries can access and receive the product or services offered. And if you think about it, charities have a very wide range of places where their products and services are delivered, and some of these are listed here. So just going through the diagrams, many charities have a physical shop in the UK particularly, and charity shops are really a feature of many high streets even today. Sometimes the products are literally dropped out of the sky, and here's an example of a charity delivering food parcel to an area where there's been some economic or natural disaster. Some services are delivered via telephone, and here the great example of course is the Samaritans, where their counselling and advice services are delivered 24 hours a day at no charge to people via the telephone. And of course the Samaritans can sometimes arrange meetings to befriend or discuss people's issues on a one-to-one basis. The RSPCA delivers its services either in places where animals are in need, or at their veterinary centres, or at the refuges for abandoned pets. So the RSPCA delivers their products and services in a number of places. The Macmillan Cancer Support Team do a fantastic job, and they either deliver their support for people suffering from cancer, either in medical centres, facilities, hospitals or hospices, or in terms of supporting people in their own home. There are charities such as Greenpeace, which is shown in the centre of the bottom, which actually are quite wide-ranging in the places that they deliver their support and their lobbying and their protests and their interventions with environmental issues around the world, whether on land, sea or air. And there's organisations such as Amnesty International, which will intervene and mediate for individual cases, but also provide lobbying services in courts and to governments and to parliaments across the world. So here's an example of different charities, and you can see here the wide spectrum of places where charities deliver their product and services and offerings and opinion formation and lobbying, depending on the sector in which they operate. It's one of the most diverse and most interesting business sectors, the third sector, charities, due to the wide variety of places and ways in which they operate. That completes our section and our discussion on the first four P's of the marketing mix: product, price, promotion, place. I'll now turn to the next section that I wish to discuss, which are the marketing mix elements to do with services. I'll start this discussion by looking at some of the specific characteristics of services that differentiate them from physical products. And these are areas that people often don't think about, but it's very important if you're in the area of service marketing, and services are the main part of the things that you offer. The first characteristic is the fact that services are intangible. You can't actually see them. You don't know what a service is like until it's actually created and delivered, because it's the result of a process, a performance, or the occurrence of a particular activity. Whether it's counselling or medical advice or training, you don't know what it's going to be like. You can't touch it, feel it. You can't understand it until you actually experience it. So to that extent, it is quite intangible. The second characteristic of services is the fact that they're inseparable from the point at which they're consumed. So as services are built and created and offered, they're at the same time consumed, whether it's a nail treatment, medical advice, a trip on an airplane, or a stay in a hotel. It's actually consumed as it is created, as it is delivered. So it is inseparable. The creation and the consumption are inseparable. The next characteristic is the fact that services are heterogeneous, and this means that they're individually produced and therefore each delivery is unique. So for example, if you had a team of counsellors or a team of educators or a team of advisors or trainers, each one might be delivering the same essential program for your charity, but the way that each individual delivers it, the way that each individual delivers, makes it unique to the consumer of that service at the point of consumption. So it's all to do with the individual quality of the person producing the service as much as it is the service that they're attempting to deliver. And I'll touch on this point again when we get on to a later P, which is the people part of services. The next definition or characteristic of services sounds quite strange when I articulate it, and that is the fact that services are perishable. They can't be stored once they're created. So, for example, if you're offering a training day with a potential to train 20 people, and you set up your classroom, you have your trainer there, you have all the audiovisual equipment, the projectors and everything, lunch is booked, but nobody turns up, then that opportunity is wasted. Those service offerings, those slots for training or for counselling, whatever it might be, have perished. They can't be reused or recovered. So that's why it's very important, if you have a charity whose offers are based primarily around services, you want to make sure there's as much utilisation of those services day by day as they're potentially offered to the market. Because once lost, it's very hard to make up and recover missed opportunities to deliver service offerings. So to that extent, services can be thought of as perishable. Members of society have changed their expectations notably over the past couple of decades in terms of what they expect from our services. They're much more demanding, and these are the characteristics that people expect to have from services, whether it's offered by a commercial organisation or by a charity. They expect the service to be consistent and high quality and good value for money, or good value if it's an exchange process such as those offered by charities. People expect much more that services are personalised to them as unique individuals and not a general offering that they can just sign up for. People expect to be treated as individuals on a personalised basis much more now than they ever did in the past. Of course, they expect the service delivery people to be courteous and polite and well educated, and I'll touch on this a little bit later on when I get onto the P of people in the services marketing mix. They expect that the service delivery person should be sensitive to our mood, and this is particularly important and well understood by charities, where the target client or beneficiary might be somebody with particular emotional or physical issues, which must be taken account of as the service is delivered. They expect the service delivery personnel to be trustworthy and professional and keep confidences and treat personal information in the appropriate way and protect it adequately. People expect services to be available, or would ideally like services to be available, absolutely at the time that they require them, with no queuing or waiting. We can all think of service delivery organisations, whether it's by charities or commerce, but this is not actually the case, which causes quite a high degree of frustration and customer dissatisfaction. People also expect, particularly for charity deliveries, that the services offered should be available when they're needed, available ideally 24/7 if that's possible, and as we've discussed before in the price discussion, should be on an affordable basis and take account of people's personal circumstances who might wish to have access to the given charity and its offering. I'm now going to quickly go through the three remaining P's of the marketing mix, those that relate to services, and the first one is the P for people. And the point to make here that this does not relate to the customers or the beneficiaries of the service offered, it relates to the service delivery personnel. And often people, when they're starting out using the marketing mix, they get confused and think people is to do with customers. It's not to do with customers, it's to do with service delivery personnel. And it's all about the quality and the training and the skill of the service personnel. This is one of the major determinants of client or beneficiary satisfaction. It's the quality and the skill, the warmth, the empathy of the service delivery personnel, and the quality they use and how effectively they deliver the service to ameliorate any issues or problems or assist with the target beneficiary or stakeholders. So the ideal service people should be well trained, professional, knowledgeable, friendly, empathetic and helpful. And this is something that many charities pay a lot of attention to, even more than commercial organisations. They usually understand this very well, and I wish the same attention could be paid to this area by some of the commercial organisations we have to deal with, whether it's a utility company or a bank. The next P in the marketing mix is the P of process, and this is all to do with how well the service requesting and delivery processes work. So whether you're somebody who wishes to make a donation, book an appointment, ask for advice, or offer your services as a volunteer, how easy and accessible and usable is the process that you're asked to go through to achieve one of those outcomes. You need to make sure that however people request your service or want to interact with your organisation, it's the same high quality. It's delivered through offline methods such as telephone call or by mail or by coupon, whether it's online through the internet or through a mobile device, is consistent and is an easy to use, understandable user experience, whichever channel is chosen. You want to make sure you meet the accessibility requirements with people for physical limitations such as mobility issues or sight or hearing issues, and make sure that you meet all of the current accessibility requirements and offer the widest flexibility for people with difficulties to access and request and interact with your products and services. The process should be easy to follow, and support and help should be available if somebody has a question or somebody gets stuck during the process. It's useful if people can pause where they get to in the process and return later. There's nothing more frustrating, for example, than going through a process and then suddenly you're asked for an extra piece of information, such as the account number or your credit card number or some personal details which you have to go away and find out about, come back to the screen and find that the system's timed out and you have to start again. So make sure that, if possible, that when people are using or requesting services, that they can pause the process and return to the same step later on. It's also useful, because people like a personalised service, that registered customers are treated as individuals. So the system has some memory about previous interactions with the organisation, welcomes people back by name, and provides a personal service from what the system understands about the wants and needs of an individual user. And I'll talk about this a bit later on when we get into fundraising and into an area called customer relationship management. But essentially, these are the things you need to think about for the process step in the marketing mix. The final P stands for physical evidence, and this really is determined by the fact that, as we discussed before, services are intangible. You can't see them, you don't know what they're going to be like until you experience them. So if you're considering using a service, you need some evidence or some proof or some explanation of what it's likely to be like. And this is why many organisations spend time building up proof points and physical evidence about the quality of service that one might expect from the organisation, whether it's a commercial organisation or a charity. So if you look at the bullet points on the lower part of this slide, this is why many organisations use things called user-generated content. And this is, for example, star ratings, such as you're familiar with sites such as Amazon or TripAdvisor or TopTable, or testimonials or case studies or references from existing clients, customers or users. So many charities use testimonials and case studies on their website and in their communication to give evidence of previous users, whether it's beneficiaries or donors or sponsors or volunteers, talking about the quality and the value of the service that they received from that organisation. People take use of this and make sure that communications tools and channels are available, and these references and user-generated content are used across communications channels, whether it's in your literature, your website, your mobile app, whether it's in downloads, videos, brochures or the forms. Wherever possible, try and include across your communications activity proof points if you're offering particularly a purely service offering into the market. Another proof point is the actual quality of the physical locations that people go to, whether it's your office, your service centre, a consultancy room, a training centre, a retail store, if you have stores on the high street, a training centre or a counselling office. Make sure that you're presenting yourself as a high quality, well organised, well run professional body with clean physical spaces if these are part of your service delivery proposition. Make sure that the staff are well presented and well educated, well trained to provide a professional demeanour, a warm, welcoming and helpful approach. Now, charities are usually pretty good at this, so I think I'm sure most organisations watching this have really got that one nailed down. And as I said before, I wish commercial organisations paid the same attention. Particularly, I've found some problems recently in the hospitality and catering sector. Use images, videos and social media in your communications to reinforce and send out these proof points and the physical evidence about the quality of the service. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in the later briefing when I get on to the specific topic of promotional and communications tactics. So that concludes the discussion on the marketing mix. Let's look at some actions you could possibly take to do an audit, if you like, or a benchmark of where you are today in your own organisations. So make a list of the different segments that you're targeting and the different stakeholders that you wish to deliver offerings to. So it could be beneficiaries or donors, sponsors, volunteers. And then think about the current marketing mix elements that you deliver to each one. And we talked about this earlier on when I discussed the fact that many organisations have sometimes out of date or less valid product and service offerings in the market today. So look at what you currently offer and go through and write a short description in terms of the 7Ps of the marketing mix. Now at the minute you might have a bit of a limitation on what you can write about promotion because I haven't covered that in much detail, but that's the subject of the next two briefings, so you'll get some more information about that. But I suggest you start now by making an audit and a description and a definition of the marketing mix for each of your main service and product offerings into the market. Are they still valuable? Are there any older marketing mixes that actually are less relevant today and actually should be discontinued? Are there any new marketing mixes that you need to develop to tackle the particular requirements of today's target stakeholders? So that should give you a good overview and an audit and assessment of what you're doing today, what you should discontinue or change, and what new offerings you should perhaps be considering. That brings me to the end of the main content for this briefing, so let me wrap up by just reminding you of the next step we're going to take in the briefing programme. In the next briefing we're going to continue our discussion on tactics, and as I promised you we're going to go into some more detail, in fact in the next two briefings, about promotion and marketing communications. So I look forward to joining you again for that briefing. Finally, let me remind you that if you have any questions or comments about this briefing, or any of the others in fact, please just drop me an email with your thoughts, views or questions to peter.rees@gmail.com, and I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll attempt to answer any questions you might have as soon as I can after I receive them. In conclusion, let me give you a quotation to wrap up this briefing, which goes as follows. Don't feel bad if people remember you only when they need you. Feel privileged that you are like a candle that comes to their mind when there is darkness. So thank you for the super work you do in the charity sector. It just remains for me as usual to thank you so much for your time. I hope you found that a useful briefing. I look forward to joining you soon for the next one. Until then, I'd just like to say goodbye, good luck and good marketing.